it is a good day to talk about money and building your personal wealth. Local financial expert Bryan is here to share her top 5 tips for doing just that. Good morning, JB.
Good morning, Cheryl. And it's always a good day to talk about money.
It is, and saving money and spending money in a good way.
In a very good way. And that's why I think that I call it the high five of wealth development.
Okay, give me a high five.
That's right.
We'll do it.
That's right.
The high five.
That's right. And I really admire everything that you're doing for yourself. I admire your entire career, and you are definitely a high five person. You really are. I love that you are right on top of my tips when I come in.
And same back at you, because you've been coming in and sharing for years good advice and things that we can take to heart and things that actually can help build personal wealth. I'm going to start right at the top. What's our #1 tip for saving and building that personal wealth?
Well, I think that we need to get out of the philosophy, even though a lot of experts do say that there's good, bad, and there's bad debt. I believe that all debt is bad. I believe that most people realize as they approach financial independence, or they approach a time in their life where they don't feel like working anymore, that they say, wow, I wish I didn't have this debt. And I remember a little cartoon I used to use. It said that I could retire and comfortably until about 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
I like that.
And what they're talking about is bills, their debts. So I think that we do need to avoid having and paying down more than our minimums on debts. And starting debts would be starting with debts that have the highest interest rate. So if we look at it that way, but I want us to make sure that we take home that a big part of wealth development is avoiding debts altogether and reducing those debts by making sure you're paying more than the minimum on all of your debt.
And that's a lesson you especially want to learn when you're young, because that high interest accumulates.
Yes, it compounds. It sure does. And for some reason this morning I was thinking about when people get out of college, and there's actually people can start their careers with a negative wealth. If you have school loans. So we've been taught that school loans are okay because they're for your education. Well, it's still a debt, and it can actually start you in a place of negative wealth. And your wealth, or net worth as we call it, is your assets minus your liabilities, and you want that to be a positive number.
And so we want to go back farther. Before you start your college education, and with some educational planning, you can actually come out of college with no debt because of grants, scholarships, and maybe working your way through school.
That was my strategy.
Mine too.
Yes, indeed. And I remember periods of time in school of having 3 jobs and going to school full time during the day. But it does reduce the debt load that you are facing upon graduation, because with less debt, as I said about retirement, the less debt, the less weight or the less pull you have on your income, because a big strategy, a big part of wealth development is making sure that you save. Big part of that high five is that you are saving at least 20%, if you can, of the income that you're making. So if you have a lot of debt, what happens? You can't save that 20%.
Yeah. One of your other tips is stop living above your means.
Yes, big one, because in America, it's just become a way of life to just have things that you really can't afford. Anytime you're carrying a credit card balance, you're living beyond your means. So we need to to become less materialistic. You'll find that most wealthy people are not as materialistic as we see on TV. We see, I like to say that rich people have a lot of money, but wealthy people don't worry about money.
I like that. And
yes.
The other thing that goes kind of hand in hand with that, your tip says stop paying for things that you're not using.
Oh, isn't that the truth though? And as I thought about this, I started talking to my daughter, terrorizing her. Turn off the lights, turn off the lights. It's so true. There's rooms of your home that sit there with lights on. You have subscriptions, you have memberships.
All those magazines piling up, the gym that we drive by on the way home and don't go to.
Yes, and some people have multiple memberships of gyms that they just, I'll go there sometime, I'll go there sometime, and they're not using them. Get rid of those things that you're not using. Store memberships that you may have, dining parties that you may have that you're not using. Be very careful with that. You may not be using your cable at home, You know, and you could just buy the box for the antenna so they can watch us, you know. Definitely.
We should sit down and maybe make a list, because all that adds up to quite a bit of money.
And that's where you're able to save more. You are so
we can put that toward our 20%.
That's right.
Like that.
That's
and,
right.
You say don't just save what's left over. You said 20% is where we're going for, but a lot of people say that's a big chunk of money.
Because imagine if everyone were like you and they thought of saving as a bill. That they said, I save off the top, not with what's left over,
right.
Because you could end up with $1 left and you're only saving $1 every paycheck.
But that was a lesson that took me a long time to learn.
But you learned it.
Yeah.
And so when you start with, I have to save this from the top, and if you have a job where they're actually matching your contributions to your work plan, then it makes it even more expensive when you're not doing it, because you're giving away money. You're losing money basically by not maximizing your participation in work plans that are actually matching your contributions.
So we should at least put in as much to the match so that we get that match.
If you can't do 20, then do 10. There was a time where I would say just do 10, then people would do 5, you know, so I say, hey, go higher, go 20, and then you may end up with 10 when you're going to be okay. But make sure that that you see your savings as a bill, not as something I do with what's left.
Right, because if you're not going to pay yourself, who's going to pay you?
Well, I don't know, because you cannot depend, and there is a strategy for a lot of people that they're depending on the government to pay for their retirement, but you don't want to have to depend completely on Social Security.
We have just a very little time left. Stop the set and forget it investment philosophy. What does that mean?
I'm glad you pointed that out for me, because set it and forget it will work for food. Your rotisserie chicken, remember that? That's where I came from, that commercial. I loved it. But you can't do that. You have to set up an investment portfolio, be smart about your portfolio, but make sure that you look at it, that you monitor it, that you look at at least your quarterly statements. You don't have to look at it every day when you're sitting at your desk at work, but definitely invest in a financial advisor if you don't feel very good about it. But you cannot just say, I'm saving for my retirement, and look at it the year before you retire or 6 months before you retire.
And we need to understand what we're investing in too.
So don't set it and forget it.
All right.
Yes,
We'll set it and forget it on that. JB, thanks so much for coming in today.